everyone, and welcome to another presentation as a part of the Berkshire's High Peaks Festival. My name is Carolyn Regula, and I will be your host today. All of our sessions are being recorded and will be live streamed on YouTube as well. So even after our master classes and lectures air on Zoom, they will be available to watch later on the Close Encounters with Music YouTube channel. Please consider supporting Close Encounters with Music and our ongoing festival. Our mission is to engage the imagination of diverse concert audiences in a welcoming setting, to connect listeners to performers and composers, and foster the excitement and sense of community that live performance builds. To establish a comfortable listening environment and to turn performances into enriching, educational, and uplifting experiences. I will include a donation link in the chat window below. You can use the chat window to talk amongst yourselves throughout our presentation today. And you can also use the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for our guest presenter today. So I am so excited to introduce our violin faculty member, Irina Muresanu. And she does master classes for us, but today you guys get a special treat. She is going to be talking about world music. And in 2013, she introduced her Four Strings Around the World project, which was a solo violin recital featuring works of composers inspired by various musical cultures. And among that, she serves on the faculty of the University of Maryland and Boston Conservatory, and she has also taught in the Harvard and MIT music departments. So it is with great pleasure that I turn things over to Irina.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to speak about Four Strings Around the World, which has been a long-term project, perhaps even longer than I knew it. I will tell you that story a little bit later. This project is fitting very well with the whole idea of diversity in music, because it's a program that brings together pieces by composers of nationalities around the world, and those composers having been inspired by their own cultures. And the violin is tied nicely into this project because the violin is pretty much, I have discovered, I was pleasantly surprised, the violin is an omnipresent instrument in pretty much all cultures throughout the world. Of course, the violin has ancestors. One of the older ancestors of the violin is the rebab. We'll talk a little bit more about that when it will be time for the piece by the Iranian composer Reza Vali. And it has several cousins around the world. The one that comes to mind immediately is the erhu, the instrument used in Chinese music. So how did this come about? Why all of a sudden I was interested as a very conservatively trained, I should say, and conservatory trained violinist. My entire life I have performed pretty much the standard repertoire. So why all of a sudden I became interested in playing pieces that really took me out of my comfort zone? Well, there's that. I do like a challenge. But most importantly, it is because one day I realized that there were pieces and techniques that were a little too foreign to me. One particular example is the fact that I tried to learn a short piece by Mark O'Connor. For those of you who have not heard of Mark O'Connor, even though that would be very strange because he's incredibly famous. I would simplistically put, a bluegrass fiddle player. However, Mark O'Connor also got his training in classical music performing and compositions. You have probably seen his name in association with Yo-Yo Ma. He did a CD with Yo-Yo Ma. And he has very successfully crossed this border between performing classical violin and performing bluegrass violin. So he has several pieces, for some of them for solo violin. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to actually learn one of them as an encore? It was a 1.5 pages piece that lasts about a minute and a half. So I thought, how hard can it be? It's used a lot of open strings like bluegrass music often does. And it's entirely in the first position. So I thought it would take me about 3 days to learn it, tops. Well, about 3 weeks later, when I realized I still hadn't learned the piece, I started thinking, well, something is wrong here. And what is it? What is it that I can't grasp about this music? I often talk about music as a language in my lessons, about how phrasing follows the normal phrasing that we do when speaking. You know, or writing, you put a comma, you put a period. The inflections of the voice that goes up when we ask a question. So similarly, we do that when we're performing music. Otherwise, the notes on the piece of paper wouldn't make any sense if we wouldn't phrase. So music being a language, I realized that music also has several different languages or dialects. And clearly there were some of those that I didn't know. And because I didn't know that particular dialect, so to speak, of bluegrass music, it was incredibly difficult for me to learn the piece. And that's exactly what raised my curiosity. How many other languages or other dialects, violin languages, so to speak, violin dialects are there? And not only I don't know them, but should I be faced with the opportunity to perform a piece in that particular dialect, I really wouldn't know how to do it. In this day and age, when the world has become a very small place, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become even a smaller place because we realize the many and wonderful connections we can make with the aid of the internet. Right now, our festival would not be possible without this, and we have the opportunity to bring together students from all corners of the world. Just think about it. Last night I taught 2 lessons in Korea. Tomorrow I'll see a student from Romania, another student from Cayman Islands, students that live here in the US but in different parts of the country. This is really amazing. So similarly, our audience, even the class, what we consider the very standard classical music audience, has greatly diversified. They want to hear, and they will connect with music that has roots in other cultures than the Western European culture, which is what most of the standard classical music repertoire is in. Moreover, with the world being a smaller place, with composers starting to move around, going to study in different parts of the world, now we have great household named composers. Brai Cheng, just to name one name that everyone knows. He's a composer that was born in China but came to study in Europe and then made his way to the US. He writes, his compositions are inspired by his native language, which is Chinese. So we need to really educate ourselves more and figure out how to speak these languages. So the easiest thing for me to do was to try to find as many of these pieces that I could put my hands on. So now we're going to show you how the first volume, I like to call it the first volume because this, I think of Four Strings Around the World as a lifelong project that will encompass many, many pieces. And the initial CD, now I'm calling it Volume 1 because I'm already starting to plan Volume 2. So I don't know if there's any way to zoom in even more. No, I think everyone can see well. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, there you go. So you see on top of it, it says music from... Oh, I think there's a little zoom and right above the name of Irina. There you go. Perfect, perfect. So you see how I tried to stay organized. And I thought of it as something, if I would fly around the world, how would I do it? I would start somewhere, and the most, the no-brainer starting point for me was the place where I was born, Romania, which is in Eastern Europe. And then continue with short stops around the globe until I would reach my final destination, which, as you can see, is the United States, the place where now I live, I work, I have a family, the place where I've been basically spending half of my life. So I did. So I started with a piece by George Enescu, Romania's most well-known composer. In fact, these airs in Romanian folk style, even though they were composed in 1926, they were not discovered until 2006. Amazingly enough, they were sitting in front of a manuscript somewhere in a drawer in the Enescu Museum in Romania. So this was not the world premiere, but it's the second time this piece appears on a CD. And I was honored and delighted to have the chance to present these beautiful airs in Romanian folk style to the rest of the world. So then I thought it would be a nice idea to stay in Europe for a little bit because, hey, there's a lot of other dialects even in Europe that I might not be very familiar with. So I zoomed all the way over to Ireland, where I had discovered, after many nights spent on Google trying to find something, I found a piece by a living Irish composer, Dave Flynn. Dave Flynn is someone who is very embedded in the Irish heritage, musical heritage. And this piece, it's pronounced Tar Éis an Condé, is an homage to 5 Irish fiddlers. This will be the piece that I'm going to talk first, but I'll walk you a little bit further through all the repertoire of 4 strings. It made sense to me that I would present the 2 greatest pillars of the standard violin repertoire, to which in some way many of these pieces actually relate. There's the Paganini Caprice number 24, which is, a towering piece, the piece that many violinists aspire to play, and it's a demonstration of all the techniques one can play on the violin. A piece that's very dear to my heart by Fritz Kreisler, and that a piece that I have learned at the advice of my wonderful French violin teacher, Michel Auclair, with whom I have studied at the New England Conservatory. So that piece is there also for sentimental reasons. And then, of course, as you can see, we get to the Bach chaconne. Truly the top of the pyramid, or the base of the pyramid, whichever way you want to think about it. It's also, I put it in the middle of the program for a reason. Again, I think of every piece as a little thread that goes back to the chaconne. All pieces in this program relate to the chaconne, which is the piece with a universal message. And every time I perform this program, I like to talk to people at the end and ask them, what was your favorite piece? I always take the chaconne out of the running because it wouldn't be really fair to compare anything with the chaconne. It's clear that this piece has a resonance across any culture, and people are always incredibly touched by it. It's a piece that really has resonance in any culture, any age, any background, so to speak. So that would conclude the first part of this program. And then it's really, we're putting on our turbo wings and we're starting to fly around the world. As you can see, there's the category. It's a very simplistic category, but I had not much choice about it. So music from Middle East and Asia really is the next chunk, and that's where Iranian composer Reza Vali comes in. His piece Calligraphy Number 5 is a beautiful example of music inspired by Middle Eastern music, very melismatic, very embellished. The next piece is a piece by Indian composer Shirish Kaur, who happens to live, kind of in my backyard, so to speak. I had looked for an Indian solo violin piece literally all over, with very little results. In fact, when I premiered this program, I didn't have a piece for solo violin, which is the whole idea of this program. So I did premiere it with a piece for violin and guitar, by the great sitar player Ravi Shankar. But then I thought, I should do something about it. So I realized that I had known Shirish for a long time, and I went and commissioned a piece for him. I'll talk more about that later when it's time to play a little excerpt of that piece. China was next with Bright Cheng, whom I've already introduced. And then another hop to a different part of the world, South America, where the clear household name was Astor Piazzolla. We're all very familiar with it, with Piazzolla's work, and I could not really not have a tango on this program. It's always a wonderful flavor, and people really it comes back a little bit to the kind of Western notation, Western system that we're used to. So people always have a wonderful time listening to this tango. So for the last, the homecoming stop, the United States, I kept thinking, and of course, the Mark O'Connor piece that I had so much trouble to learn had its place as the last piece in the program. But I wanted so much to have a piece by a native composer. And I looked and I looked and I looked. There was nothing. So what does one do when you can find something? Well, you create the opportunity. I was not familiar with any composer of Native American descent, so I did start asking around, and several people pointed out to exactly the same name, Jared Impich Cha Chaha Tate. Impich Cha Chaha being, of course, his Chickasaw name. He's a Chickasaw Nation citizen, and Jared very gracefully agreed to write a piece especially for this program. This piece is called Oshta, which actually means four. It's a little, homage to four strings around the world. So of course I was tickled pink to get a piece with that name. Thank you, Caroline. So this is a overview of the repertoire of four strings around the world. So let's go a little bit deeper into what it took as a musician, as more particularly as a violinist, to play this repertoire. First of all, as a musician, to do the research. This is pretty much, I would say, the equivalent of writing a book, where you go and find material for your book. You have to dig in, you have to make the connections. This is, as you could just hear, the case with with Ionescu, a piece that I did not know about with David Flynn, where I had to go research the repertoire when I wanted saw a piece that had Irish roots, and even it has to do with commissioning a piece, which is something that any musician, not only violinists, but any musician in their lifetimes will and should do: connect with the composer and have them perhaps write a piece for you or for your ensemble. You might have to give the composer an idea if you want them to write a piece that's related to a theme or a certain program, like it's the case here. You will have to look for funding. We can't really assume, we can't assume that we're gonna perform for free a concert. You can't assume that someone will write a piece for free. It would not be fair to the composer at all. And so that again goes into a different hat we have to wear as musicians, to be a little bit entrepreneurial when it comes to maybe writing grants or finding some funding from your institution, and so on. But as a violinist, what it took to play this program was getting familiar with other techniques. And this also means that I had to go out of my way to start listening to other kinds of music, to start watching closely what, the YouTube is such a wealth of pretty much one can find anything on YouTube. So I started looking at Irish fiddle players and noticing some things that they were doing with the bow technique that I really had no familiarity with it. And little by little, even taking a lesson, so to speak, or had talked to a colleague that's more familiar with that kind, and asking them, what does it take to play this kind of music? I have scanned a few of the pages, and I want to show them to you. I'm going to share a little bit. Hopefully everyone will see. There you go. So this is a little bit a fragment of Dave Flynn Tar Ashan Condé, which means after the keening, by the way. And this relates to keening being for those of you that are not familiar with the term, is the whole process of mourning someone's passing. And after the keening is the moment where people get together and support each other and start sharing memories. And sometimes it's actually happy and even funny memories of the departed. Is the moment where people really bond over the memory of someone they deeply cared about, they deeply loved, and bringing back memories of the past is actually a beautiful moment that contributes. Think of it as a memorial service where people remember times and events in the lives of the departed. So this is the gist of this piece, which was used by Dave Flynn as a opportunity to pay homage to 5 very famous Irish fiddlers. And this is exactly how I could do my research, because some of them are actually on YouTube, and I could watch them and watch their styles. One of them is someone who's sort of still in his prime time, fairly young. Then the next one is a fiddler that's clearly part of the old generation, sitting down very comfortably in a chair, not playing with too much bow. And this is where this next section comes in, the Con Cassidy. This is a Highland for Con Cassidy. Violinist, you're probably familiar with Courant, and look at this. This is exactly what in Bach, the rhythm that Bach employs in the Courant in the second violin partita, where you have a mix of triplets right here and dotted rhythms, with a little quirk being that sometimes the rhythms are not only long short, but they're also short long, as you can see right there. And so this contrast between dotted rhythms with accents and triplets immediately brings this courant, which of course was a popular dance, to mind. The other place, the earlier place, is you can see how many grace notes, how many little embellishments there are in this music. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. But because of all these grace notes, the music takes on a very fluid character. It even though the rhythm is very steady, it's basically quarter notes and eighth notes, it never feels in a straitjacket, so to speak. It always feels very moving, very fluid. One section goes into the other one, but somehow the rhythmic engine, the pulse of this music, never stops. So playing these grace notes very lightly, way lighter than I would play them in normal, like, you know, the way I would play them in a Mozart piece, for example, took a while to kind of have that lightness, that deftness in the left hand, to embed them very smoothly in the bow work. My inclination being at first to play very articulately, very clearly, and as I was working with the composer, he pretty much told me that wouldn't sound very appropriate. The other thing that was funny when I worked with Dave Flynn on FaceTime. Actually, we met over Skype. I was playing several different sections, and he was telling me, you know, these people don't have very expensive Italian instruments, and they often play in, you know, late at night in bars. You know, probably at that point one could still smoke in Irish bars. You know, every now and then they take a break. Maybe they'll have something to drink. So their sound it's more gritty than the sound of a classically trained violinist. And at some point, I think he got a little a little frustrated with me, and he said, you know, you're like all classically trained violinists. You play too well in tune. Which, of course, on one hand was a great compliment. On the other hand, I realized that I really didn't yet have what it took to get the particular flavor of the Irish music. That didn't really mean that I shouldn't play the right pitch as written on the page, but it meant that somehow the notion of pitch is a lot more flexible in Irish fiddle music, for example, or in other cultures, I should say, than in our standard Western European culture. I'm going to play for you a little fragment of this piece. In fact, kind of the fragment that you just saw. I'm going to share the screen, and hopefully we had a little bit of internet problems, but hopefully that's not going to be the case. There you go. As you can see, this is a hoot of a piece, and it took not only a lot of, as I said, deft left hand work, but it took a lot of a lot of right hand work. So once you get into that little jig, where the accent don't really fall absolutely on every regular beat, you know, one has to really, your mind and your hands have to coordinate very well. You know, for fiddlers this is very easy. You know, they're used to these irregular rhythms. For us, not so much. So that was a steep learning curve, and it really it gave me something to practice, so to speak. But of course, it was also a lot of fun because, as you can see and hear, the music is very alive, and it's very rhythmic. It kind of keeps you on your toes, and this is something that kind of takes you out of that sort of classical music training. What do you mean? I'm supposed to give an accent where on a weak note? Yes, you are. I'm supposed to give an accent when I'm changing the strings? Yes, you are. So kind of taking yourself out of that mindset of a classically trained musician might take a little bit of effort at first, but it's really worth it. And in researching ways of assimilating these techniques, I learned so much. I made new friends, and I realized that one thing that people always comment on, and again, it really, it's very rewarding to hear that. At the end of this program, people come to me and say, wow, I had no idea that the violin can produce so many different sounds. And this is precisely the point, that one instrument, and you know, I love the violin. I think it's a kind of, you know, the instrument that it's closest to the human voice, and I'm really trying to show people just this, that this one instrument that maybe some of them only associate with classical music, some of them only associate with fiddle music, some of my audience members only associate with Indian music. The violin is a very wildly used instrument in Indian music, where it's actually held differently. You will see. I'm so rewarded to see that all of a sudden people realize, wait a second, this is an instrument that goes across all these cultures. And this means that even though it speaks all these different dialects, there's something that, you know, unites all of us through the sound of the violin. I'm gonna move forward. I'm sorry about this strange sunlight. I didn't realize. Let me move a little bit this direction. It might not help, but it might. Okay, well, I'm trying to do best. The next piece in my program that I would like to talk about is a piece by Reza Vali. Reza Vali is a wonderful Persian composer that was born in Iran, but later on, like Bright Chang, went to study. He studied in Vienna, and then he moved to the States, and he is now a distinguished professor of composition at Carnegie Mellon. His writing is inspired by the music he heard when he grew up. Middle Eastern music, music that is very complex, music that is in some way more free than many, many, many other types of music. He's, as you can see, you'll see in a second, his music does have bar lines by default, because obviously he wanted to put it into a system where musicians can read it easily. However, it does not have the feeling of a bar line. I'll show you in a second what I mean. You'll see, let me share the screen. So here is the first page of Reza Vali's piece. Wow. Just at the first glance, you realize how different the rhythm is in every single bar. Just think about for a second how Dave Flint's music looked like. It was pretty steady. You know, you had either 8 notes for the entire page, or you had this alternate rhythm, a dotted rhythm with triplets. But here, my God, so we start with a 16th note triplet tied to a syncopation, then we go into a triplet, then we go into 16th notes, then the 16th notes are dotted, so you have short, long, short, short, long, tied to the next bar where you see a triplet, and that triplet is regular, we're going back to doublets, and so on, and so on, and so on. And similarly, even the meters, which he tried his best to give one a sense of a meter, we start with 2/4, then we go to 3/4. As you can see, I had to circle these to kind of as a reminder to myself. I like to actually play this piece from memory because it's more conducive to sounding almost as it's improvised. Then we go in 4/4. There's 3/8 right there, back to 4/4, 4/8, 2/4, 6/8, 3/8 plus 2/8. Wow, it's quite a journey. But the purpose of that is to, as I said, to have the listener feel like this music starts with an idea, and actually this piece is written in an ABA form. What you hear in the beginning, you will hear, and in the end, this little theme comes back about 2/3 of the piece, and then there's a little coda. But the way the music connects in between should sound very, very improvised. There's a lot of accents, as you can see in this in this first page, and the meaning of the accents are that every note should be very well pronounced, right? So very, very well enunciated, almost as a spoken, very clearly spoken discourse. One interesting thing that I had to deal with was, follow my mouse, I'm circling around a note, an E, that looks like an E flat, but if you really look closely, and we're gonna try to zoom in, it's not quite a flat. Look at that. What is that? That is called a coron. A coron is like a flat. It flattens a note, but instead of being a whole step away from the F, it's about a 1/6 of the way. Trust me, when I heard that for the first time from Reza Vali himself, my eyes got wide because I had no idea what he was talking about. But then he sank the note, and I heard the difference. It was not a pitch that, it was not an E flat. It was a little bit above an E flat, but nonetheless, it was a very clear pitch. Then immediately I tried to copy on the violin, and the second I caught the right note, the violin started resonating. So we forget that in Western traditional European music, our each tonality is split in 12 half steps, right? We have 12 pitches. So uh, we think of a half step as the smallest um, measurement, the small distance between two notes. That's actually wrong. Many other cultures use quarter tones. And this is actually an example of that, of music that uses quarter tones. Um, there are other examples. There's an A coron right there. There's a F sharp. I'm gonna try to zoom into that, which is not quite a sharp. Let me see if I can zoom even closer. Okay, right there you can see the F. It's not quite, sorry, I have so many markings there. The sharp is written a little differently, as you can see. It's not a regular sharp, so this is an indication of a sharp that's not as high as a regular sharp, but a little bit lower. So now let's hear how all those corons, how all those quarter tones sound. I'm going to ask Carolyn to play a little fragment of this piece. So this is Reza Vali's calligraphy. Thank you, Carolyn. So that is Reza Vali Calligraphy number 5, a piece for solo violin, inspired by Middle Eastern music, more specifically Persian music. If we don't have any questions, and I don't see anything right now, I'll move on. Not before mentioning that again, that the Persian music has the oldest ancestor of the violin. Oh yeah, we do have one question. How is Koron spelled, and are quarter and microtones the same thing? So I'm gonna put this in chat. Koron is spelled like this, and microtones and quarter tones, yes, they're the same thing. I would say that microtones are the general category because sorry, excuse me. I suppose there can be even smaller units than quarter tones, right? A semitone is kind of a half tone, so a quarter tone is a quarter tone, and I guess you couldn't have even an eighth of a tone. That's where you're getting into very, very, very small units that are hardly distinguishable, especially by our ears. But yes, so the microtones would be the general category in which the quarter tones belong to. Yeah, I'm if if we would have a computer program right here, I could probably put in. I'm sure that can easily be done now with MIDI sound. We could fool around with playing half tones, third of tones, quarter tones, eighth of tones, sixth of tones, and see if we could distinguish them. I'm sure probably composers have these, especially composers that are interested in using non-Western traditional system. Probably have programs that indicate all these variety of microtones. Yeah, so the rebab is one of the oldest instruments, and it really created the concept of the string instruments as we know them, building a resonance box made of wood, a perfect resonance box that has its dimensioned modeled after the kind of the kind of register one would want. In other words, the higher the register, the smaller the resonance box. The lower the register, the bigger the resonance box. So now we obviously we can visualize a violin in contrast with a double bass, right? So that's why the dimensions of the instrument, the string instruments, are what they are, because they are built to sound higher or lower, and then the fact that the sound is produced by the friction of bow hair, which is horsehair, on the strings. Of course, the strings were not made like today. They're made of perlon and other materials, steel. Back then, people had gut strings, which then they would tighten according to the kind of, again, pitch they would want. And the friction between the horsehair and the strings would create vibrations. We are in the business of making vibrations. So these vibrations, by putting the fingers on the strings, we would shorten the string and to create different pitch sounds on the same string, and voila, you have a string instrument. Any string instrument is basically built on with this concept in mind. The ones that are the exception are, of course, are the plucked string instruments, the guitar, the sitar, which is an Indian instrument which has many more strings than a guitar, and the harp. So the vibrations are created by plucking the strings instead of drawing the bow across the strings. Of course, we can do the same thing on our string instruments, and We, in fact, the next piece that I would like to talk about, which is the piece by the Chinese composer Bright Sheng, starts exactly with that. Starts with um, open strings and left-hand pizzicatos at the same time. Um, Before talking about the particular piece, I would like to play a little movie that will show you more about the Chinese culture, and its relationship with with our culture, and the relationship between the erhu as an instrument and the violin, and even a little bit about Bright Sheng. So here's a little slide that I present before playing this piece. I'm going to share the screen, and let it speak for itself. Go on. Okay. Here we go. I hope you enjoy that. It's a beautiful slide made by my ethnomusicology colleague at the University of Maryland, Professor Larry Witzleben. And as I said before, I always play this slide. I have one for every piece in the second half of the program, for multiple reasons. First of all, it's nice for people that are not familiar with the music of these other cultures to learn more about first of all, to hear how the genuine folk music, Iranian music or Chinese music sounds, to learn a little bit more about these other, as I said, ancestors and cousins of the violin, and to see beautiful images associated with that culture. You see those beautiful Chinese sketches, and how detailed they are, and so is the music. Very often the visual arts tie into the flavor of the music of that culture. So it's also important to make the transition between one musical system and another. It was very hard for me to go from microtones, chorons and such, to pentatonic music, which only uses five tones. The transition also for the audience is fairly abrupt. And these slides that bring in again some information, and also the visual and the traditional music really help ease that transition. Let me show you a little bit of the Bright Chang's. Oops, hold on. Okay, here we are. So this piece is called, the piece I chose to perform in this program, it's called The Stream Flows. And it has it has two movements. The one you'll hear today is the second movement, and it was inspired by, in Bright Chang's own words, by it's an old men country dance. So I'm not sure exactly what this means, but it probably means that it has a sort of a heavy set quality, which you'll hear right away in the beginning. This piece tries to imitate the sounds of multiple instruments, amongst them not being only string instruments, like in this section right here, where you see legatissimo. That's definitely a section where he tries to imitate the sounds of the erhu. But in the very beginning, he tries to imitate sounds of other instruments. Percussion instruments are very present in Chinese traditional folk music, gongs, and other kind of metal percussion instruments. So the intention is to hear a little bit of that abrasive nature of the cymbals of these instruments, coupled with, or contrasted, I should say, with the more nasal, as you could hear in the music of those slides, the nasal sounding quality and the very lyrical quality of the erhu. You could hear a lot of slides in the erhu, and this is probably also part of how the instrument is played. It's played like a cello, so it's very easy to slide up and down the neck of the erhu. So that instantaneously gives the instrument a vocal quality. Back to these pizzas. So he starts very traditionally with normal pizzas, but then immediately, as you can see right there, while the lower voice is played by the bow, the upper voice is a little bit of punctuation of left-hand pizzicatos. So you have tia, pia, papira, punctuated by these left-hand pizzas that are, kind of going back and forth as a counterpoint, a rhythmic counterpoint of this very repetitive little theme. Bright Chang, I should say, was very influenced by Bela Bartok. He admired Bela Bartok's legacy of going from village to village Bartok was actually born in a village in Romania. So what he did, he started traveling around with a recording device, which we used tape, a very old-fashioned device, and started traveling in villages in Romania, Hungary, the former Yugoslavia, to collect songs and dances sung and played, performed by genuine, country men and women. And out of this incredible collection, an archive that's really of inestimable value to the world. As some of these traditions are probably long gone. This happened in the beginning of the 20th century. So out of that collection of songs and dances, Bartók started getting inspired, has started taking the essence of that music and putting it into his own music. So sometimes he would transcribe an actual song or dance, and one of the most well-known examples of this is the Bartók famous Romanian dances. I'm sure that many violinists actually learned this piece at one point or another. So those are actually transcriptions, sort of cleaned and beautified with nice harmonies and accompaniment. And some of Bartók's music are not transcriptions, so the music sounds like folk music, but in fact everything is composed by the composer. It's just he just distilled the essence of folk music, and put it on paper without actually quoting a genuine song or dance. So someone pointed out that this beginning of the second movement of the stream flows looks a little bit like the beginning of the Bartók fugue in the solo violin sonata. It's true, it has a little bit of that sort of short motif quality that gets longer and longer. It's very repetitive. So maybe Carolyn, you can play a little bit of this piece after I stop sharing, of course. Sorry about that. Thank you, Carolyn. So as you could hear there, there's a lot of, very, very clashy sounds, lots of pitches, lots of chords. As I said, they're meant to imitate sounds of cymbals, of gongs, um, contrasted by the sort of meditative, pensive, lyrical sound of the erhu in its violin imitation. Um, any questions about any of the challenges of learning this music? It really required a lot of coordination, and you can see, like, moving from a low part of the violin to a very, very, very high register. And they're also their meter changes, not nearly as many as in the Reza Ali pieces, but again, the music is not in a very conservative type of meter. So Braicheng alternated the accents and also the way that the rhythmic patterns are in the piece. Wonderful. So from here, it made sense to, of course, go to one of the richest musical cultures, to Indian culture. And as I mentioned in the beginning, when introducing this repertoire, I really searched far and low to find a solo violin piece by an Indian composer and couldn't, which of course is strange given the predominance of the violin as an instrument in Indian traditional music. However, there is an explanation. Traditional Indian music is, I would say, 99% improvised, if not even 99.5% improvised. The system they use is a system of ragas. Ragas are like tonalities, but there are many, many, many of them, much more than our regular tonalities, C major, and then we have tonalities with sharps, we have tonalities with flats going up and down. But ragas have a lot more variety. So there are ragas for the mood of the performer. There are ragas for the occasion of the performance. There are ragas for the weather and even the season when they're performed. There are ragas for the particular time of the day. So as you can imagine, this is the ragas are modes, really, and pitches are arranged in correspondence exactly with what I just mentioned, what that particular raga is suited for. The regular structure of a raga performance starts with introducing the pitches of the raga. Often there are a few predominant pitches, 2, 3, or 4. There is always a drone of 1 or 2 alternate notes that one performs on top of when introducing these raga pitches. And then little by little, the pitches kind of evolve. So let's say you start from the lower register, they kind of start making their way up as the music warms up a little bit. That introductory section is followed by a more rhythmical section named Jor, followed by then a little bit of a transitional, we can call it maybe like a resting section called Alap, followed by the last section of the piece, which is usually a very fast section, which is called Jala. And that's where the performer really shows their virtuosity. That's where the improvisation really goes wild, and the performer has the chance to really show off how much virtuosity. Of course, one never gets out of that particular raga And then all slides sort of back in the beginning. The endings are usually very, after a frenzy, a flurry of notes. There's always like a little coda in which we kind of go back to that sort of peaceful attitude in the beginning. So listening to various ragas, I thought, my God, wouldn't it be amazing to have a piece inspired by this raga structure? And I went to Shirish Khorde, the Indian composer I had known for a long time. I deeply admire his compositions. He actually has a beautiful violin concerto that one of my colleagues performed in Boston, again inspired by Indian music. And so I went to Shirish Khorde and commissioned a piece for solo violin on a raga structure. And I realized it was not an easy feat. It took Shirish quite a little bit of time. We were not in a hurry. At that point, it was the CD was just, kind of a plan in the future. But as time went by, I started inquiring about the piece and wondering if I could get little fragments, and I could really never get anything back from Shirish until finally I emailed him. This was about 2 years after I had asked him to write a piece, and I emailed to him. This was back in December, and I said, well, I am premiering your piece in February, in the beginning of February, and it would be nice to have a little bit of this piece to get an idea of what I'm getting into. 2 days later, Shirish wrote back to me. My commission was for a 5 to 7 minutes piece, inspired by a raga for solo violin on a raga structure. The email from Shirish Khorde said, "Dear Irina, the piece is ready. It's called Vak. I know you asked me to write a 5 to 7 minutes piece for you, but it was pretty hard as ragas are usually very long, sometimes an hour and a half long. So the piece that I wrote for you is actually 38 minutes long." You can imagine my surprise, because this piece was supposed to fit with the rest of the program I just showed you, including the Chaconne, which is a lengthy piece. So after the initial fainting, I called him and we had a nice chat. And we realized that the piece, of course, couldn't be so long. But we decided to go on and kind of chisel the piece as I learned it. So I learned the entire 38 minutes. And then we went back and forth, Shirish and I, playing through different sections and eliminating some maybe adding some, few things. I gave him a few suggestions about how a certain technique fits on the violin or not. And little by little, by the time of premiering the piece, we had chiseled it down to 18 minutes. That was what the piece was premiered at. Then it became, by the time I recorded it, it became 3 sections of about 4 minutes each. So it came to about 11 minutes, which made sense in the context of the entire program. So then we had a little bit of there was one important question. Something that Shirish solved immediately, because he had the experience of writing a similar type of piece for a colleague of mine, cellist. The issue of a drone. As I mentioned, any raga will have a drone. Someone who has an instrument and plays through one or two pitches that settle this mood of the raga. And well, clearly I couldn't have a guest artist coming in for just for one piece. So the question of the drone was quickly solved by an app that I'm going to show you immediately if I can find it on um, my phone, which is called Tempora Droid. I'm going to show it to you. It's something that you program. As you can hear, it goes through a cycle, and you can make the speed faster or slower. Here you can really hear the three pitches. It's an A, followed by a high E, another E, and then the same E, a lower octave. So you, of course, you can program these to be different pitches. That's a G sharp, maybe something different on the top. That sounds a little strange. These pitches are all, they have their own names. It's sa, re komal, re, ga komal, ga, ma, pa, ma tivra, pa, da komal, da, ni komal, ni. So they're basically the equivalents of our do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, or C, D, E, F, G, and so on. So at the premiere of the piece, I had my little guest artist, my little drone. I'm gonna play different sections. I'm gonna go back and forth. This is a video from the premiere, so this is a video of the longer version of the piece with my little electronic drone. And as you can see, I'm wearing it's not quite a sari. It's a beautiful Indian shawl. I try to put into my program whenever I have a live performance of four strings around the world. I wear little, theatrical props, little visual aids that are supposed to really pay homage to that particular culture. I have a beautiful Persian jacket that I wear when I play Reza Vali's piece. I wear this Indian shawl when I'm playing Shirish Korda's piece, and a Chinese red vest. It's of course it's an element of visual diversity, but more than that. As I said, it pays homage to the beauty of that particular culture. So here's a little bit of Shirish Korda's music. Listen for the like in the air who's playing, for the variety of slides that I'm playing. Here we go. You can already hear the drone. That's the introductory part when I'm really kind of slowly playing through all these pitches. Now you're hearing how I'm already playing a little higher. A little bit later. I'm starting to play a little higher now. I'm gonna jump to the next movement now. This is the jaw. Very rhythmic. Okay, and then we're gonna get into the jala. That's virtuosity passages. Okay, so you have a flavor of that. So I, as I'm listening to this, not all of those passages made it into the final recording, and I'm actually sorry that they haven't, because it's everything is so good. It was really hard to actually distill all these, the entire piece into a smaller, more into its own essence. So, as you can hear, Indian music is also very free-flowing. There's quite a bit of contrasting sections that one has to be able to sustain this. And first of all, we're talking about endurance here. The pieces are fairly long, and actually the 11 minutes, which is a short version, they don't feel like 11 short minutes. There's a lot of an endurance factor, because one has to keep its mind on the thread of the raga. right? Like keeping everything in one, almost in one gesture, in definitely in one mood, so that it feels not like three separate sections, but it feels like one complete circle. Um, any questions so far? You probably heard glissandos, but very different types of glissandos than in Bright Sheng. Glissandos going up, glissandos going down. Kind of like the type of glissandos where you really slide the finger down audibly, very slowly on the fingerboard, so that again kind of gives it a sort of a throbbing, sobbing quality. This comes from the way the violin is held in Indian music, which is actually vertical. It's actually held. You know what? Let me play the little slide I have for this, because it will be nice for you to see a few images of how Indian music, Indian instruments look like, how genuine Indian music sounds like, and several images of the violin and the sitar. So I'll share the screen, and you'll be able to see that. There you go. Okay. So now you have a little bit more of a sense of how the violin is used in Indian music, and how it's held, and the beautiful sounds between the violin, which you just heard, and the tabla, which is the rhythmic instrument, and this drone that is always there. It really has been a wonderful experience, being an honor for me to be a creative part of commissioning, and putting this piece into life, so to speak. I think it's time to move on to a piece that is also commissioned, and it's very dear to my heart. And this is a piece by the Chickasaw Nation citizen, Native American composer Jared Impich Cha Cha Tate. It I couldn't have really I envisioned this Four Strings Around the World program to be very representative of each region, and I couldn't really see this project without a Native American piece, and this is why I went and asked around, and every road led to Jared Impichcha Chahatate, who's a delightful human being and who immediately responded with great enthusiasm about the idea of writing a piece for solo violin. In this process, I also found out a lot about the culture, and in fact, let me also play the video for that, because it's really beautiful to see how Gerard incorporated an old Chickasaw hymn in his in this piece. This is a piece that also employs a little bit of a drone in the beginning. In fact, in the beginning, initially, Gerard Tate wanted me to sing a note for a long time. It was a little hard because I had to breathe at some point, and so the idea of this drone note was interrupted. So we replaced the voice with a G open string, as you'll hear in a little bit. So here's a little bit more about Gerard and about how this piece came to life. So the song you just heard is the actual Chickasaw hymn that inspired Jared to write Oshta. Carolyn, I think we have a little video from a live performance of Oshta, and I should tell everyone that the way I perform this piece, it's a very inward piece, a very meditative piece, a very evocative piece. And I kept thinking about what would be the best way to perform it, especially as I just explained that I'm incorporated visual elements in performing the other pieces in the second half, the Iranian piece, the Bright Chang Chinese piece, the Indian piece, and so on. And as I kept thinking about it, the best way to experience Jared's Oshta is in the dark. So I decided that I had never done this before, and it's a whole new experience, of course, as a violinist to play in the dark. But I decided that that way, nothing will come in between the music and the audience. So this is a video from a live performance of Oshta. Carolyn, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't give you the right. You know what? Let me, because I sold it as the live performance. Let me quickly find it. Let me find the actual performance. We can get out of here, and because I have it in my my Dropbox. Sorry about that. That was from the actually that was from the Naxos YouTube file, but I have right here a little bit of the solo performance. I'll find it in 1 second, and you'll be able to experience a little bit of. Okay, I found it. You hear the slide. Okay, here we go. gives you a sense of what this music is about. It's quiet intensity. It's deeply rooted music. This is as the slide show you. This is a hymn that's hundreds of years old. So Jared Tate took all the weight of all that time and distilled it into this beautiful piece. Just because it's a slow piece or a piece that employs mostly a modal, you heard lots of fourths, lots of fifths. It doesn't mean that it's an easy piece. In many ways, the pieces that are hardest are the ones where you have this emotional intensity and you have to sustain that. I'm going to pause for a little bit for questions before our last couple of minutes of videos. Do we have any questions from the audience?
You have a question from me that I'm kind of holding on to until the end. Irina, when's your method book coming out? When's your memoir coming out about making this album? Have you thought of creating any supplementary materials for your project, Strings Around the World?
That's a great question. I have a little too many projects right now to have considered that, but it's as the project will continue, and I have a whole volume 2, if not even starting the volume 3. I have a list of new pieces. This year I have commissioned 2 pieces, one from Nigerian composer Fred Onoveresoke, and called Abeni, and a piece from a female Iranian composer, Sanam Garachek. She lives in France. She's lived there for many years. And she also wrote a piece for me as well for this project. And there's other pieces that I have discovered, a piece by a composer in Uruguay. So I'm making a new list of pieces, because obviously one CD could not cover even a small percentage of all cultures, all nations. Of course, we didn't have Australia, we didn't have a composer from Africa. This is where Fred Onoveresoke, is kind of a hard name to pronounce, comes in. And I before perhaps putting out a compilation of all these pieces in a book, that would probably be interesting for someone who is curious about performing pieces inspired by various cultures around the world, to find them in one edition. I would love to do that with maybe little notes accompanying every piece, or even video tutorials on how to play this. So that is a long-term project that will most likely happen at some point in the future. Right now I'm staying busy trying to really cover as much territory, musical territory, as I can.
And geographical territory, right, too, from the sounds of it.
Exactly.
I think that's a wonderful idea. And often, even when we look at etude books, sometimes they'll have a little snippet in the beginning with some preparatory exercises. So I think if you do create a volume of all of these works, it would be an easy part to incorporate for sure.
Exactly. Especially as we're seeing more and more, even the curriculum requirements of auditions right now. We at the University of Maryland, we have a sentence describing that should someone not feel that a piece in the standard violin repertoire, in the standard audition repertoire, does not represent them, they should feel free to replace that with a piece from the less mainstream repertoire that represents who they are and their interests. And I think we're all, we're going in this direction, which does not negate. It's not either or here. It's not all or nothing. I think we're really talking about widening the circle. we're never going to eliminate the Bakshakon from the violin repertoire, because that would be, first of all, how can you envision the violin repertoire without the Bakshakon? It's something that enriches everyone at any level. But by widening the circle, by introducing more and more pieces from different musical systems, we actually will become better musicians and better players. How This is a question from Thatcher. How was your exposure to different musical cultures and relationship to violin technique impacted your teaching in one-on-one lessons or master classes? Haha, yes. Well, it certainly has, because it opened my mind. It opened my mind to new possibilities. It opened my mind to new sounds. As I mentioned, one comment that I get very often at the end of these live performances is, wow, I had no idea that one single instrument could produce so many different sounds depending on what piece you played in the program. So it enhances, first of all, my perception of what the instrument that I thought I knew so well can do. And I realized I had many, many more things to learn even after playing it for 40 years. But it also gave me an open-mindedness about how to teach it and how to explain different ways of performing even traditional repertoire, of suggesting what kind of other music the students could listen to again inspire them to create and hear different sounds of their instrument. So it's been a learning experience that continues to this day. I'm not pretending that I've learned everything there that is to learn. And one point that I often like to make, this program, putting together this project, was not about me trying to imitate, trying to copycat an Irish fiddler or a rebab player or an Indian musician, because they'll always do it better than I can do. I am the voice of the composer that was inspired by these musical cultures. So I'm embodying the essence of the music by translating the written music, which is my professional job to do. So to translate that in sounds and moods and characters that are as close to the original folk music that the composer was inspired by as much as I can.
Beautiful, beautiful answers, Irina. And I loved what you said, that there is always so much more to learn. Like, I don't want to disappoint any of our students watching, but when you graduate from college, you're not done being a student. We're always lifelong students. I don't think we have any more questions, Irina, so you can feel free to move forward.
Okay. The other thing that I would like to say as a continuation to that last question was going out of my challenge zone, which clearly was a problem in the very beginning, and it's still a problem, but it's really I grew wings a little bit, because yes, was I scared? I think the morning of premiering Four Strings Around the World, I told my husband that not even when I participated in Queen Elizabeth competition, which is probably the Olympics of the violin, I was so nervous about this. I was clearly doing something that no one, even myself, was expecting me to do, to walk on a stage and go through all these different musical cultures and violin techniques. It was very scary. It was very adventurous, yet it enriched me so much. And this is the one thing that I always talk to my students about. Don't be afraid of something just because you don't know it. In fact, it should inspire you. It should embolden you to be more adventurous, to create your own path. only the first step is the scariest one. Every step you put forward after that, it's less and less scary, and it will lead to other avenues. So being musically adventurous is a good thing, and just because you don't know something, it should not intimidate you to the point of not tackling it. Okay, so last but not least, I just want to play a little bit, as a little goodbye to our audience of the Piazzolla tango. The Piazzolla is a household name. He collaborated with many classical performers, Rostropovich and Yo-Yo Ma being some of the most well-known ones. With dancers, he really was part of the musical scene from the 1980s until his death. His music has been performed and is being heard in many ways, in many different ensembles and so on. The violin is an omnipresent part of a tango band. So it was part of the Piazzolla's tango ensemble. This is again a little bit of a live performance from a University of Maryland performance at the University of Maryland. Let's see. I'm gonna probably say goodbye with this performance. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions. You can always email me or contact me through my website. Carolyn, if you're so graceful to put that in the chat so that people have it. It's basically my first and last name.com. I hope you enjoyed this program. There is more to come. And also, if should you like to get the CD, you can find it easily on Amazon.com. Just type in 4 strings around the world, and the link will show up. So here's Piazzolla Tango Etude number 3.
Irina,
Yes.
I really hate to interrupt you. It sounds beautiful. Did you mean a screen share?
Oh my God, I am so sorry.
You are fine.
sorry.
You are absolutely
You're
fine.
looking at me and I'm looking at the video, but I forgot to screen share. Here you go. I'm so sorry. I apologize, everyone. There you go. That that was my presentation for Four Strings Around the World.
Wow, thank you so much, Irina. This has been amazing. And as Irina said, I really hope it inspires some of you to look into other musical cultures and to really see what might interest you and kind of going beyond your repertoire. Absolutely learning the traditional classical repertoire gives us the technique and gives us a chance to find our own musical voice in that avenue, but we can absolutely go beyond that avenue and, as Irina said, kind of musically tour the world. So thank you so much, Irina, for this. It was incredibly fascinating, and the work you've done, the variety of work, is just unbelievable.
Thank you. I just actually put another link that on my website. I have actually, if you go straight there, there is a page for Four Strings Around the World, and that will give you more information about the entire project, the repertoire, the recordings, videos, the whole concept. So I hope that will inspire some of you to come up with your own projects. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Of course, and we still have 3 more days left at the High Peaks Festival. And yes, 3 days, just triple checking on that. You can find our events on the Close Encounters with Music website, and it has it all laid out in a calendar format, and you can register for talks. We have a couple more master classes tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have Elliot Fisk, who is going to be leading a guitar master class with our guitar students. And then on Sunday, also 10 a.m., we have Colin Carr leading a cello master class. So, little sneak peek into what's coming up. Thank you all so much again. Bravi again to Irina. And we hope to see you again for future talks. Have a wonderful day, everyone.